Live from Arlington, Virginia, this is Transport Topics Newsmakers, the digital interview series that gives you access to candid conversations between industry experts and a veteran reporter. Sponsored by DAT. Here's your host, Dan Ronan.
Welcome to Newsmakers from Transport Topics. Our guest is someone who is well known in the transportation safety field, and it's the first time that the National Transportation Safety Board Chair Jennifer Homendy has joined us for a face-to-face conversation. We have a lot to talk about, and before we begin our conversation with Chair Homendy, I want to tell you that DAT is the sponsor for this edition of Newsmakers. So let's watch this short message, and we'll be back on the other side here on Transport Topics.
We've come a long way. By working together, we've delivered. Regardless of the challenges. But we've learned a lot through decades of tackling uncertainty. Uncertainty that slows us down. Whether it's rates, capacity, storms, or the economy. Too often we're left guessing when it comes to freight. It's time for a new path. We believe it should only take 30 seconds to book a load. We believe in using automation to build trusted relationships, not replace them. We believe in more options, but fewer apps. We believe in covering the entire journey. From the beginning, the middle, and the end.
First, a short bit of information about Jennifer Homendy. She was confirmed by the U.S. Senate in 2018 to the NTSB. She became the 44th member to serve on the board, and she became the NTSB's 15th chairman back in August 2021. She has been involved in transportation safety-related issues for more than 25 years. First as a government relations manager with the Iron and Steel Institute, later working with the AFL-CIO and the IBT, and for 14 years on Capitol Hill as a Democratic staff member for the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. She holds a bachelor's degree from Penn State, and we welcome the chairman to Newsmakers. Chair Homendy, the NTSB recently made some news when it called for the states to lowering the blood alcohol level to be considered legally impaired from 0.8 to 0.5. Why now?
Well, that recommendation actually goes back to 2013 when we issued our Reaching Zero report focused on eliminating drug and alcohol impaired driving crashes. And it's part of a comprehensive approach that the NTSB takes on reducing impaired driving. And countries all over the world have much lower BAC levels. We're at 0.08 across the United States, except for in Utah. Other states have begun initiatives to reduce BAC to 0.05. We're pleased that Utah is the first, and we believe that will save lives.
I'm glad you mentioned the Utah situation because the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration did a study that showed that the number of alcohol-related deaths in that state because of the lower blood alcohol content level dropped pretty significantly, about 20% roughly.
Yeah, it's at the time there was a lot of debate, and those who opposed the NTSB's recommendation said the numbers would not improve and that it could be detrimental to businesses. And we know now that impaired driving crashes were reduced and that it did not have a negative impact on businesses. So it's a success. And it just shows that initiatives like just reducing the BAC level can result in a culture change.
Do you think that in some states that have a culture of alcohol, which traditionally have been states that have been resistant to this, do you think they'll go along with it? I mean, Utah is a state that has a pretty conservative reputation when it comes to alcohol. Do you think that you can convince some of the states, such as Wisconsin and others, that are pretty well known in that area in terms of the higher blood alcohol content level, to go along with this?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the surrounding states to Utah have much higher levels. There have been initiatives in California, New York, and Hawaii focused on reducing BAC levels to 0.05, even in Michigan as well. We hope others will follow and see the success. What we're not saying don't drink, we're saying don't drink and drive.
I want to talk with you about the larger problem that we are having and experiencing in this country the last several years. You know, we're 2 years now into the COVID pandemic, and we have seen, as you know, traffic-related deaths in this country increase pretty significantly. The final numbers for 2021 are being tabulated, but the final toll will be well above 40,000, and this comes after several years of declining deaths and injuries. What are we doing wrong as a society?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of factors. I mean, one thing I'm interested to see is the effects of the pandemic, certainly on, everything from what Americans are facing right now on in their personal lives, certainly plays out on our roads. But in general, how we have addressed road safety is really focused on education and enforcement for decades now. And while that's critical, that has to be part of the solution, of course, and has to continue. We really need a broader look, a more comprehensive, holistic approach to addressing road safety.
And one of the things that we're hearing a lot about is that speeds have been up on our highways. Just recently in the Washington, D.C. area, we had a driver driving on 95 in Northern Virginia at 119 miles per hour with an open container of alcohol. Sadly, these type of stories are not particularly rare. They're pretty familiar, aren't they?
Yeah, speeding related crashes are up, impaired driving crashes. We've seen an increased lack of seatbelt use. And so, and an increase in deaths of pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists. So it's a significant concern. The numbers, like you said, are going in the wrong direction, and we need approach, which is why the NTSB has been very focused on a safe system approach. I mean, you mentioned speeding, Dan. There are a lot of ways to address speeding. Certainly enforcement is part of it, but changing the culture around speeding also includes for example, using safety cameras to reduce speeding. You mentioned 95. The state police do a great job at stationing along 95 to reduce speeding in the Washington, D.C., Virginia region, but they have other duties. And so using technology to reduce speeding, like safety cameras or having speed limiting technology in vehicles, which the NTSB has promoted. And then also looking at our road design and how that can address speeding as well.
It just seems as though, as a society, and I think this says something about our society, that as a cost of being a mobile society, we are willing to accept 35,000, 40,000 deaths a year and 4.4 million people requiring hospitalizations. As a safety professional and as one who's devoted her entire adult life to this, it has to be quite disturbing. I mean, from what you do.
Well, it is extremely disconcerting. I mean, when we look at death in all modes of transportation, one fatality is a serious concern for us. Our number is always 0 across all modes of transportation, and we've seen tremendous success at getting to that in other modes of transportation. But we really have a lot of work to do when it comes to road safety, which is why we're very focused on it. And I'm going to continue to push on this very issue to make sure it gets the attention and focus it needs to get to 0.
There are groups out there such as the Coalition to Zero and others that have been aggressive about this and doing a lot of good work. And heaven knows what the numbers would be like without those type of things. But I've talked with, as you know, numerous people in law enforcement, judges, police, prosecutors, and others who say that just people are driving too reckless. When we went through this period a year or so ago when the roads were a little bit emptier than they are now, that people just decided that speed is good, and they're seemingly haven't changed their behavior any.
Yeah, I think we need to be really careful about blaming everything, though, on human error. Mm-hmm. There is always going to be risk-taking and poor decision making, but we really have to look at everybody's responsibility, whether it's in road planning and design, whether it's in looking at the safety of our vehicles or other technology or enforcement or education. We have to look at all of that as part of the solution and making sure we're addressing this from all areas. That's how we deal with safety in every other mode of transportation. But for some reason, when it comes to our roads, we always want to just focus on the driver. We can't just focus on the driver. There are a lot of solutions that we need to implement outside of just the driver to make sure that when there is a crash, that driver, that passenger, that pedestrian, bicyclist, motorcycle, that they survive.
So I know the NTSB is an agency that makes recommendations, and you guys stay as nonpartisan as you possibly can, considering the fact it's Washington, D.C. But will the infrastructure bill and the spending for $1 trillion or so on highways, roads, bridges, and the like, how much will that help in terms of getting at some of these chronic road design issues, bridges that, as we saw just a couple of weeks ago in Pittsburgh, are in pretty bad shape?
Well, I do think that funding can play a role there, a big one, especially with aging infrastructure, as you point out, when looking at a bridge collapse in Pittsburgh. But that's not the full solution. Money is only part of the way there. What we also have to look at is federal, state, and local regulation. Are those adequate? Policies and practices, are those adequate? And is everybody doing their role or doing what they need to make sure that lives are saved on our roads? So it's policy and process as much as it is funding. It's not just funding. That'll only get you part of the way there.
Chair Homendy, we have seen in recent months, as you know, a number of these incidents on airplanes where people just are behaving very badly. Had an incident just a couple of weeks ago where a flight attendant and some passengers had to tackle a person who was unruly and ended up hitting him on the head with a coffee pot to subdue him. There seems to be, just as an observer, a lack of civility in society these last couple of years. Some of it has to do with this just lack of civility where people seem to be angry, and because of that, maybe they're driving more aggressively and they always seem to be in a hurry. And there's this attitude that my getting to a place in time is more important than your right to cross the intersection without fear of being run over.
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked this very question a lot in the past few weeks. I have not seen data or research that shows me that is what is occurring. So I want to be very careful on making assumptions because I don't see the data yet on it. But overall, our road system is built to accommodate efficiency, how to get someone from A to B. Safety has not been the primary focus, whether it's in road design, whether it's in technology and where technology is going that could be life-saving, or whether it's policies or practices or even education and enforcement. We really have to focus on safety and not just efficiency. And that has really been what's lacking in the past several years.
Have we made vehicles that are maybe a little too tempting in terms of with all of the things in the panel, in terms of wireless communication and maps and everything, where it's become maybe a little bit overwhelming for some people in terms of the temptation not to watch videos or be distracted while they're driving a car?
Well, certainly that is an issue. I mean, we have to be very careful when we're looking at designing vehicles to make sure we're focused on potential driver disengagement and distraction. And, at the same time, we have states who have allowed use of technologies, even handheld devices, some of which have prohibited devices, but you're still using it over, say, Bluetooth or speaker, which is still just as distracting. So hands-free is not risk-free, but it's something that we continue to focus on here at the NTSB, because we do think with all this technology and all the capabilities of vehicles right now, that is a substantial potential.
As you know, Chair, the commercial aviation sector of the economy is in the midst of what truly is a remarkable run in terms of safety. There's not been a major domestic airline accident in this country with a big loss of life since Flight 587 in New York. And then 11 years ago, of course, there was the regional accident in Buffalo. The airline industry has really done some remarkable things. What are some of the lessons that have been learned in the past 20 years in aviation that our viewers in the trucking industry can take away from our conversation, and those fleets can improve their own culture of safety?
Yeah, I can tell you, when there's one death in the aviation industry, everybody gets together. It's the airline, it's the regulator, the NTSB is part of that, it's the union, it's everybody that gets together to figure out how do we prevent this from happening again. And they really take a very comprehensive approach to addressing safety, which does not exist on our road right now. Our road, when we look at road safety, again, it's very focused on one individual. It's the driver instead of everybody else's responsibility. When you deal with aviation or any other mode of transportation, it's a very comprehensive approach. It's what can everybody do, from the manufacturer to the airline operator to the pilot to the flight attendant, you name it. And that's the approach that needs to be taken on our roads. One thing for the commercial truck drivers that I think is important is to speak up when there's a safety issue. I do believe when there are safety issues, a lot of times those who are the frontline workers identify the issues first. And to have a just safety culture so that there is an ability to speak up when when there's a deficiency, goes a long way. And they have to be enabled to do that.
Is there that availability to do that? I know with aviation, there's the NASA form where you can anonymously report whatever safety deficiencies there might be with no repercussions. Do we need something like that in the professional trucking industry and in that particular sector of transportation?
Yeah, we have promoted that in other modes of transportation, including rail, which is not currently utilized like it is in aviation, but we think it could go a long way to identifying significant safety issues before a crash occurs, so that can be proactively addressed.
And that's been very successful in aviation for
Yes.
more than the last 20 years in terms of reporting potential deficiencies, or because it can be done anonymously and it is done with no repercussions there. It's something you report, it's checked out, and if there's an issue, it's fixed.
Exactly.
Professional truck drivers that I talk to say that the trucks that they're driving have never been more technically adept than they are now. How can we use some of that technology with some of the sensors and with the data, the amount of data that is being transmitted to the back office? I know that aviation over the last 25 years is using that data that is transmitted back to the offices and the manufacturers to improve safety. Do we need to look at that for our community, the professional drivers in that community?
Yeah, I mean, data can go a long way to really telling you where potential problems are so that you can proactively address them. There's certainly a lot of automation right now, and with that comes data, but it's a lot of data. And the companies have to figure out what they have and how that should be used and could be used proactively to address safety. On the technology front, when it comes to commercial vehicles, we just had a board meeting focused on a crash involving a large motor coach, and several tractor trailers were part of that. And we believe that automatic emergency braking, forward collision warning, connected vehicle technology could certainly go a long way to improving safety, and have recommended that specifically in commercial motor vehicle safety.
In the 1990s, when I was covering aviation full time, the NTSB was quite busy with regards to aviation accidents, as you know, back 20, 25 years ago. Has there been a change in focus because of the fact that we have not had nearly, thankfully, as many aviation-related accidents, that this is an opportunity now for your agency to start to drill down deeper into some of these other safety problems on our highway that are a little bit more broad-based? Is this an opportunity for the NTSB?
We do have a multimodal approach. We have an aviation office, an office of highway safety, an office of railroads, pipelines, and hazardous materials investigations, and an office of marine safety. And in all those, we still have, safety deficiencies that we're very focused on. I mean, passenger vessel safety and commercial fishing safety is an area that I'm focused on just as much as I am on road safety. But, so we can't let up where we've seen success, because some of that success has been because of the NTSB's work along with FAA and other safety partners. But we do have to look at areas where we could do more. And in an area where nearly 40,000 people are being killed a year, millions more injured, we really need to weigh in and see how much we can push to get our safety recommendations implemented, to see how much we can weigh in on eliminating those fatalities and injuries.
I want to talk with you about a topic that has been something that you've gotten a lot of attention on and a lot of media attention on. You've been pretty critical of some of the autonomous vehicle manufacturers, specifically Tesla, calling their full-service driving feature misleading and irresponsible. Has Tesla been cooperating with the NTSB on some of the recommendations your agency has made regarding this feature?
Well, just one bit of clarification. Tesla has level 2 technology. It's driver assist technology, not autonomous vehicle technology. And that's where I think part of the problem is. When you call something full self-driving, you have an entire community, no matter how much you put on a website, no matter how much you put on a manual on where the restrictions are. If you call something full self-driving, there's a whole group of people who might think it is fully autonomous if they just take their hands off the wheel and let the car operate. That's not what should be occurring. At the same time, let me be clear on where we are on technology. We believe technology could save lives, proven technology. We've seen it in all modes of transportation, from aviation to positive train control technology in rail, to leak detection and mitigation measures and technology in pipelines. We've seen tremendous success. And of course, automatic emergency braking, forward collision warning, lane departure assist, so many technologies that are available now in vehicles or could be available now in vehicles that we need to implement. But when it comes to forward looking, we need to be very careful that when it comes to innovation, that our focus is on safety. Safety is the driver. And having vehicles out there where you're basically testing them on our roads, you have to be very sure that that technology is safe, that there are redundancies in place, and that states, local governments, and the federal government knows what is being done.
And so you're saying, and you believe then that in this case that more needs to be done, that we're not to that point yet where we should have these vehicles out on the road in a widespread situation.
Well, I think they're going to have to conduct testing, but you have to make sure that certain safety measures are in place and redundancies are in place. There's a way to do that through evaluating the technology. But I will also say, at least on the side when it comes to NHTSA, right now they're using recall authority as essentially a way to address safety deficiencies, which is something we recommended. But at some point, you have to go beyond recall authority and address safety proactively before an incident occurs.
Okay. I want to talk with you and spend the next couple minutes just chatting with you in the remaining 5 minutes or so that we have left about this particular topic, because it gets a lot of attention in the trucking industry and it's gotten a lot of attention overall. While the NTSB is calling for tougher standards regarding blood alcohol content, many states, as you know, are aggressively legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana. And there is not a standard type of testing that is commercially available that can indicate how intoxicated or impaired you might be, like there is for alcohol. You blow or take a blood test, whatever it is, and we know pretty much how many drinks you've had over the course of how many hours. Is this decriminalization or legalization, is this the right direction we need to be going with the absence of the fact that we don't have the testing available at this time?
Well, the NTSB hasn't weighed in on decriminalization of marijuana. What we have weighed in on is a concern with drug impaired driving. Mm-hmm. And we do have a concern. There isn't a cutoff level. There isn't a standard way to test. And we think that needs to be addressed. We have issued recommendations on that. In fact, it's interesting because we are doing a pretty big research initiative right now focused on drug impaired driving. That research should be out in the fall. And it is focused on this very issue about standardization and making sure we look to addressing the fact that we need to identify cutoff levels to figure out what is impaired driving when it comes to marijuana.
And we just don't know. That's the problem right now. You can THC can be in your system for, depending on your body chemistry, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. We just don't know. It's not like, as I said just a moment ago, it's not like alcohol.
Yeah. There are definitely challenges. We have supported oral fluid testing. We do support hair testing. But with each of those, there are challenges, of course.
And as you know, Chair, the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse has disqualified an estimated 90,000 drivers because of failed drug tests to one degree or another. And a good many of them have been because of marijuana. And even if you live in a state like Colorado, which is legal to use marijuana, your CDL and right to drive interstate commerce is a federal right, not a state right. So if you do an edible or smoke a joint in Colorado and then go back to work and take a drug test and fail, even though you might be clean, you're going to be going into the clearinghouse and into the disqualified list for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, we have raised the issue of more education, certainly by companies, but also medical professionals and others, to make sure individuals are aware that you should not be driving impaired, and certainly after, whether you're ingesting or smoking marijuana, that is a disqualifying offense.
Back in the remaining 2 minutes that we have left, what's going to be the toughest challenge you believe is a safety community to getting these highway traffic fatalities down? Is it reducing the use of texting while driving? Is it going to be encouraging more use of seat belts? Is it lower speed? Is it a combination of all of the above? What is it going to be?
I think the biggest challenge is we have 50 state DOTs that we need to really have a comprehensive approach to road safety and pulling together the national, federal level with the state level and local level to make sure that the policies are in place, that the regulations are in place, that the proper education is in place to make sure we get to zero. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Did the state DOTs appreciate this? When you talk to the state DOT leaders, do they appreciate this and understand your level of concern and the concern of other safety professionals?
They do. Of course, everyone has a different way of approaching road safety, but they do know the numbers are up. It's just how to address that. There might be differences. Of course, there are going to be differences, but it's working within that and seeing how we can move forward. I mean, one thing I like to point out to people is often we're all talking to each other, and we need to figure out who's not at the table right now because somebody's not hearing this message. Somebody isn't understanding, and we have to figure out how to address that. It's going to be a challenge.
Indeed. Chair Homendy, we appreciate your time and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
In closing, we want to thank our sponsor, DAT, for making this Transport Topics Newsmaker webcast available. We also want to thank Jennifer Homendy for being so generous with her time to answer our questions. This webcast will be available for on-demand viewing. Go to ttnews.com for more information about how you can watch our interview with Jennifer Homendy and others as well. I'm Dan Ronan with Transport Topics at ttnews.com. We thank you for watching.
Thank you for joining us today. For more information on future episodes, visit ttnews.com. This has been Transport Topics Newsmakers.